Okay, so the questions are, what's canon? And that's a definition. I don't know when we say canon of scriptures, that's a study by itself. If you go to seminaries, you might have a whole subject on the canon of scriptures. What's that? The canon of the Bible. How and when were the Old Testament books canonized from canon? What was the Council of Jamnia? Very important name. How many divisions of the Tanakh? What did we say the Tanakh is? Tanakh. We did. I did. For sure I did. Where did we get the Tanakh? Anybody? So Tanakh is an acronym of three letters. TNK. What's T? What's K? What's N? Good. Tanakh is for Torah. They say the Masoretic scribes called the scriptures, the Old Testament, tripartite, three parts, Tanakh, TNK, Torah, Navaim, and Ketuvim. What's Torah? The 5 books of Moses. What is Navaim? Hmm? No. The prophets. What's Ketuvim? Books. So they divide the Torah because they are into the Bible. This is something very beautiful. They're into the Bible. They know the Bible very, very much and very close. So they divide them into three pieces. The Torah, which is the law, books of the law, the 5 books of Moses. The Navaim are the prophets, including the history books and the major and minor prophets. What's the Ketuvim? Poetic books, like Psalms, Proverbs. That's called Tanakh. How many divisions of the Tanakh? Which books are included in each section? What are the different canons of the Old Testament books? What is the Dead Sea Scrolls? These are the questions we're going to look into. Very basic, very simple. We're not going to go in details. Each one of those items is a study by itself, subject to study, and have the kind of speciality. So let's go and see what's a canon. Okay, before I go, anybody has an idea what canon is? Oh, okay, wait a second. So there is a canon with a double N, and there's a canon with one N. And what's the difference? What's a canon with a double N? C-N-N-O-N. What's a canon with a single N? What's that? Okay. Yes. Yeah, that's a weapon. But what's a canon with a single N? It's a Greek word for. Have you ever had the thought of asking your father of confession for a prayer canon? What's a prayer canon? A gun to pray with? What's a prayer canon? Yes. So if I give a synonym for canon, what would that be? Hmm? Not tradition, but like a routine that you do. Good. It's a rule. A rule. You give me something to do so that I know when I'm not doing it, that I'm not really doing a good job. So if you go into your father of confession and he says, you have to pray matins, the whole matins, and usually you don't do that, and a whole compline, and you don't do them, you know you're doing wrong. So before we go and sin, I have to have a prayer rule. We have a reading rule. That's what we call spiritual canon. So in the book of A Silent Patriarch of Pope Carlos, he had a canon. He wakes up every day at 3 a.m. in the morning. He does tasbihah. He makes Orban. He starts liturgy at 7 or 6 a.m. And then he finish Tasbeha, he does liturgy, and then he finishes liturgy by 8. Then he doesn't eat. He just receives people and he talks to them and does some chores. And he gets to kick everybody out by 2 p.m. And then he goes into bed maybe by 8 to wake up again at 2 a.m. That's his canon. So what does he eat? When does he eat? He eats by 3 p.m. or 2 p.m. Forgot. After he kicks everybody out of the place where he is. So canon is a Greek word meaning reed. What's a reed? Stick, right? And came to refer to any straight stick that could be used for measuring. This basic meaning was extended to refer to any rule or standard by which things could be compared or judged. So when you go to ask your father a question for a canon, I want to know how am I doing in my prayer. So it's not left to me to decide am I okay or not okay. And it's not really just a mood. I don't feel I'm doing good with the prayer. No, all of us have to have a canon that suits our life. And a Christian life, an Orthodox Christian life, you don't leave it to yourself. You have a canon to live by. The Alexandrian grammarians, these are very big center of Greek literature. They had the library, the Alexandria, Library of Alexandria, very famous one. The classic Greek writers, who were not simply grammarians, but also what we would call literary critics, used canon as their term for the list of standard or classic authors who were worthy of attention and imitation. So he said, our canon is a list of books. So give me an example of one of those books that you would know it. That the Greek, they didn't have the Bible yet. This is before Christ. They're not Jews, they're Greek. You know, stuff. Uh-huh. Huh? Which part? Because mythology is written in a different way. So they say the Iliad and the Odyssey. These are part of the books that people should read if they want to be saying that we've read something worthy of reading. Homer stuff, right? Homer writings is part of this read. A list of books that is worthy of reading. So if I call it today, what would be the list of books that you should read to become educated? What books you should be reading? Can you be reading Tintin and say, I've read a couple of comic books? Would that be part of the list? No, no. What would it be? I'd say you would have to say under the list Shakespeare stuff. I've read, you would say, at least I would think Julius Caesar. Or I've read King Lear or Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. That's a list of books that Shakespeare wrote that represents classic English. You might say, I have read um, uh, like the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, or I've read something like The Tale of Two Cities, which belongs to, what's his name? That's a writer from Britain. What's his name? Hmm? Huh? No. Tale of Two Cities. Wrote like you read Oliver Twist or Bleak House or who wrote that stuff? You want to say I read for America, Charles Dickens, right? You read some classical English like Shakespeare, or a little bit more contemporary like Charles Dickens, or something American. What would you read? What do you? So some people would say, okay, I've read, for example, oh, you can say that something more closer to our age would say The Lord of the Rings, or I read the Narnia group. then you would say that's more standard or classic authors. So, who were worthy of attention and invitation. This was not a closed category. They keep adding to it. We say closed category when the group is finished and we cannot add anymore. Open means it keeps adding to it. So if you talk about literature, is it closed or open? It's open. Every few years, a good book comes out and people recommend it for others to read it. And there were disputes about adding or removing works from the list. Furthermore, inclusion on the list merely recognized a work's quality. It did not confer upon it any new status. Nevertheless, a canon of writings came to denote those texts that were of central importance to a given group. So some group was very focused on philosophy, some group was focused on mythology, some group was focused on history, and each group had their own canon. We get that. What's a canon, anybody? Let's test your knowledge. And in Greek, grammarians use the word canon. What's canon? Is it single N or two N? Single N. What does it mean? Literally.
Way the Greeks used to measure.
Measuring stick or reed.
Way the Greeks used it, they used it as to measure if the book was worth reading.
Exactly. Is worth reading that would benefit the reader to give him some education, to be educated. So there's no high school diplomas. That I've read this and I can actually answer questions about it is enough. So let's talk about the Old Testament for canonization. Now we're talking about canonization, the verb. Canonization broadly construed as the process through which the Bible became the Bible. So you're gonna tell me, so how did the Bible came to be? Why were these books included? Why we have in the Old Testament Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, we have Judges, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, First Samuel, Second Samuel. Why we didn't include like Homer's stuff in the Bible? Why we didn't include the Epic of Gilgamesh in the Bible? Yes.
It wasn't canonized to become into the Bible.
So what is that? This is the process now. We're talking about canonization.
It's a whole different thing. It's not the Bible like going last lesson. It's the story of salvation, and
right. Good. So this is not about the source. So what about the book of Enoch? Why is not part of the Bible? Who said that the book of Enoch does not belong to the Bible? It talks about the story of salvation too. Or the book of Asher, which is mentioned in the Chronicles.
Story or like distract you from the part that you
Could be. We really don't know. Canonization, studying canonization is a very tricky science because we don't have any history of how the people of the church, the Old Testament church, the rabbis who gave the Bible to the next generation, sat together and asked the question, what was the measuring stick that they were measuring? Like you were trying to say, maybe because of that. We don't have that. Okay. So it was the Old Testament church that agreed on certain books to be included. We do not know exactly how various books were chosen to be part of the Bible to the exclusion of others, how these books were put into a particular order, and how their text was established. Since there are no contemporaneous documents, we have no documents that describe this process, it needs to be reconstructed from indirect evidence, namely from the variety of biblical texts from different periods and places that have survived and from later traditions in rabbinic and other sources that discuss canonization. We can have a rough idea about why these books were picked. Furthermore, when used in reference to the Bible, canon has an ever stronger significance. Listen, this is very important. For Bible, canon, which means what to be included, what not to be included. That's basically what it is. Canon, which book should be in the Bible, not only is a given text set of texts included, but all other texts, no matter how worthy otherwise, are excluded. This sense is expressed in rabbinic comment on Ecclesiastes 12 to live. 12. The biblical text reads, if anyone beyond these, and beyond these in Hebrew is heb mehema. That's the word for um, said beyond these heb mehema. My child, beware of making many books. There is no end. You can make many books. There is no end to it. The rabbinic comment states, those who bring more than 24 books, the standard number in the Tanakh, yeah. So the standard number in the Hebrew is 24. Those who bring more than the 24 um, and into their house introduce confusion. And the Hebrew, mihuma. And then in English it is mayhem. You ever heard that word before? Mayhem means what? Confusion, no order. You go into a kind of a very confused status. So the words in Hebrew are the same. If you bring more than 24 books, which is standard number, they introduce confusion. Okay. This suggests not only that the works in the canon are important, but that they, along with their authoritative interpretation, are sufficient and of themselves. Once the biblical canon was fixed, there could be no additions to it or subtraction from it. More important books in the biblical canon, unlike those in the canons of the Greek grammarians, came to be thought of as divinely inspired. So what are the two differences between Greek canon for literature and the Greek canon for literature and the biblical canon? There are two differences. One, I'm going to say it like this: difference between Greek grammarian canon of literature and biblical canon. What's the difference? Number one. At least two big differences. One, that's number two. The Greek grammarian canon is biblical canon is right? What's the difference between open and closed? Open canon means you can add it more, you add more. The Bible is once decided, they're not only recognized as the books, but they're also recognized as sufficient. We don't need to add anymore. Nothing can be added to it, right? So it's number two. Number two, what's number two? Greek grammarian books, canon books, are not divine, while biblical canon is divinely, we said this last time, inspired. What's the word inspired mean? No. We said, no. Is it there's revelation, inspiration, illumination, and authorship. 4 words we said last time. What is revelation?
Revealing mystery.
That's about mysteries, right? God actually, yeah, or we can say to bring something out of hiding, right? Bring something out of hiding. It exists, but it's hidden. And what is inspiration? I told you just take that word and put something instead. Is this the same? No, it's not. What's the inspiration? Writing it down. And what we are writing down, revelation. Is the Bible revelation? No, it is the document that contains the revealed word. So when you look at the words of God appearing to Moses in the burning bush, is that a revelation or an inspiration? It happened once in time, right? When it happened that day, it was a revelation. But when Moses sat down to write it, that was an inspiration. I told you this. We have to be carefully. I asked the question: is the Bible revelation or the document that contains revelation? Is it documentation of what happened, or it is actually what happened? The documentation. Not every time you sit down, that God does not appear in a burning bush to Moses. It doesn't happen. We just have it documented. So there are two terms: revelation is when it happens, and inspiration is when it is documented or written. Thank you. Okay. So the biblical canon is divinely inspired. So what do I mean inspired? Means it is written down. That's important to keep in mind. Always take the word inspiration and write instead in your mind written. Got it? Revelation is when things happen. There's no new revelation after Christ. Oh, we have the Bible. Okay. So these are two important differences. One, the Greek grammarian canon is open, while the biblical canon is closed. The Greek grammarian canon books are not divinely inspired, but biblical canon is divinely inspired. What about the Council of Jamnia? This is, you can read about it sometimes. That's why I'm bringing it. In fact, it is not important. But why is it important? Because people sometimes talk about it. Until the mid-20th century, in the 1960s maybe, many scholars thought that the canon of the Tanakh was established at Yavne, Jamnia, a city near the Mediterranean coast in Israel, west of Jerusalem, that was a center of Jewish learning after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. So Yamnia or Jamnia is a city where in Egypt. Is it Yemen? What's Jamnia? Read it again. Can someone read it? Stephen, read it. Until the mid-20th century. Huh? Tanakh
was established at
Yavni, which is in English.
sitting near the Mediterranean coast, west of Jerusalem, that was the center of Jewish learning after the destruction of the Second Temple. 70 CE. According to this theory, a group of rabbis met there in about 80 CE and voted on whether or not certain books or canonicals at the end of this meeting. The official content of the Bible was supposedly established.
Okay, so what does that say? Anybody understood what this is? Yeah.
Till the 12th century, they thought that it was in the city of Jamnia that they established, that they canonized the books in the Bible.
Exactly. The 24 that we know today. I'm talking about Hebrew Bible, right? But is that true? After the mid-19th century, what happened? Okay, Anthony, read the rest. It is now.
This overly neat reconstruction is wrong and was based on a misunderstanding of rabbinic texts. the rabbinic text,
Rabbinic,
text
that's the teacher of the Jews, yes.
that tell of this are no longer understood as granting
Canonical status.
status, but are now viewed as reflecting certain
Ambivalence.
ambivalence toward particular biblical books such as Song of Songs, which were already in the canon, and whose
Canonical.
presence needed to be justified.
So what does that mean? What does that mean? The people in Jamnia, when they met, they were not actually canonizing the Bible. What do I mean by canonizing? Mr. Yusuf, what does canonizing mean?
Like making them a must read or making them like an official part of the Bible.
Exactly. So the people, the scholars thought this was a council to say which book should be in the Bible, which should, but actually it is not. But what was this Jamnia about? Reading again the writings of the rabbinic writings. What was it about? What's ambivalence?
Making some books more important to read than others.
Ambivalence. When you say you're ambivalent about something, you can look it up. To be not sure, to be hesitant. Is this part of the Bible or not? Ambivalent is not, you're not actually sure. What did you get? Mixed feelings. I have a mixed feeling about it. I'm not sure. Should the Song of Songs have a little bit of a difficulty because Song of Songs have language? By the way, the Jews and their teaching, the rabbinic teaching, would not allow anybody to read the Song of Songs before the age of 30 because of sexual content. And they would say it's not appropriate for anybody to read it before a certain age. So he said, is this really? So there was an ambivalence. So when they met in Jamnia, they were actually confirming Song of Songs had to be included in the Bible. They were just confirming it. Unfortunately, evidence is not available to offer a clear picture of how the canon of the Bible was formed, since much of the material from early Jewish sources, including the Dead Sea Scrolls, rabbinic texts, and the first century CE historian Josephus, and Christian sources, is ambiguous or biased. They don't like those sources. This much is clear. So what's clear about the canonization? The canon of the Bible did not develop at a single moment. I want us to highlight this. This is very good. I want to highlight it, make sure that we get this. The canon of the Bible did not develop at a single moment in time, but rather in stages. There is general agreement that the Torah was the first section of the Bible to be canonized, that is, to be recognized as central by the community, which means the church, the Old Testament church. Exactly when did this happen is uncertain. When did they say the Torah? For example, right? The Samaritans have only the Torah, 5 books of Moses. That's their Bible. Samaritan Torah. That's it. They don't have Samuel. They don't have Kings. They don't have Isaiah. They don't have any of it. They only have the 5 books of Moses as their Torah. So what else? They say it was an Ezra time. Many scholars had associated development with Ezra, that they saw that the law of your God in Ezra, which Ezra was entrusted in the 5th century BCE as the Torah. We now recognize, however, that this assertion goes beyond the evidence of text. We don't have any to assert that. It's not really sure that Ezra is the one who did that. Though the Jewish community had recognized the Torah as central to its identity by the Persian period, which is 6th to 4th centuries BC. 6th to 4th centuries BC. A conclusion suggested by citations, I want to do that. So just instead of BCE, we say BC. I would like to keep it consistent. 1st century AD. Okay. By citation of the Torah material as authoritative in biblical books from this period. For example, Chronicles, Ezra, and Nehemiah, they all refer back to the Torah. It's unclear exactly. What's Torah? The 5 books of Moses. Okay. So in Ezra, Nehemiah, and Chronicles, there is a reference back to the Torah. We know that these were already canonized as something standard. It's unclear exactly how this happened or whether this development should be associated primarily with a single individual such as Ezra. Ezra is extremely important. I want to just say that. Ezra is, by the way, he's called the architect of Judaism. Just keep that in mind. To give you some very little pieces of information that will help you later. Ezra coming back from the exile, coming back with a community that's broken and have very difficult struggles. He needs to get them to be unified, and that's why he's considered one of the most essential figures. They said if God did not give the Torah to Moses, he would have given it to Ezra. Ezra is very extremely important. It's a more complicated process than likely began during the Babylonian exile. Okay. These are the books. It's important to see that. After this introduction, we're going to look at Tanakh, and that's what we call it Tanakh. We have evidence for the Tanakh in Luke, in the New Testament, when Jesus talks about Moses, the prophets, and the books. Or sometimes they don't say the books, they say Psalms as a representative of the books. So Jesus speaks about the disciples. We're going to go there. And Luke 24 to 44, you know what's 24? Is the count of the two disciples of Emmaus. Are you familiar with that? So we're going to say Luke 24. Let me go there. Here. The two disciples of Emmaus, everybody knows the story, right? Do we need to read it? Do we need to read the story of the two disciples at them going on the road? So let's read it. Now, that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that happened, the crucifixion and rumors of resurrection. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" He asked, "What things?" "About Jesus of Nazareth." They replied, "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but did not find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels. They're just thinking they're dreaming, who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. He said to them, "How foolish are you? You are, and how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning, look at this. Moses with Moses. What Moses is? Tanakh, the books of Moses, the five. And all the prophets. What's that? Yeah, right. I think there is one more here. He explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Let me see. Let's go into New King James. So might some translation might take this out. Okay. RSV maybe. What is New King James? Here. See if they have it. So at least he's recognizing here Moses and all the prophets and all the scriptures, the things concerning him. Where else you can find it? So there actually the three sections is indicated somewhere. Let me see. Explained. Okay, let's go back and then I will find out. There's a place where he actually says that's 44. Maybe it is actually when they're telling the story, 44 is down. 44. Here. This is when he appeared to the disciples in the upper room. He said to them, "This is what I told you while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that's written about me in the law of Moses, that is Torah. The prophets are Navaim." You say that after me? Navaim. And what the third one is? The Psalms, which is part of the Ketuvim. So this how the Jews construct their Bible or look at their Bible. This is it. So you have three parts. Look at them. The first part is small, 5 books. Second part is bigger. Third part is bigger. First part is made of 1 group. Second part of 2 group. Third part is 3 group. First part is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. 1 group, Torah. Second part is Nabaim or Navaim, is 2 groups, A and B. A is former prophets, and B is latter prophets. Former and latter means someone came before the other. The former include Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. The latter are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12. What's missing here? Ruth and in the former prophets, Ruth. What's missing in the latter prophets? Where is Daniel? Right? Daniel is not part of it. Where do you find them? Here. Here is Ruth. And here is Daniel. And notice the Chronicles and Ezra and Nehemiah are in the historical books. Exactly. You're going to learn a little bit more about that, how the Jews divide their Bible, not like ours. So they say history is prophetic, is prophecy, because it's written from the point of view of God. The prophets saw history from their point of view. Chronicles is not really history, it's a commentary on history. If you look at Chronicles, it's a repetition of things in Kings. Exactly, but it's a commentary. Like somebody writes reflection on it. It's divinely inspired, but this is what the people saw it from their point of view. This is seen from the point of God, this is seen from the point of people. The poetical books are Psalms, Proverbs, and Job. Yes. Yes, that's almost like commentary on all these books. It's not adding any more history. These are the real history. Kings, Samuel and Kings are the real history. They are not prophetic. They're not written by prophets. So why Daniel is not a prophet? They say because Daniel was not dedicated prophet like Ezekiel, Jeremiah, and Isaiah were dedicated prophet. The 12, Hosea, Amos, Joel, Obadiah, Habakkuk, all these minor prophets were actually dedicated prophets. They were just consecrated to do that. So here is something, the 3 groups at the end. So the former prophets are history. The latter prophets are major and minor prophets except Daniel. While the Ketuvim or the Hagiographa is 3 groups, poetical books 3, Psalms, Proverbs, and Job. The 5 scrolls is 1 book. What are they? They're used for feasts. They read the songs when? When do they read it? When do they read Ruth? Ruth is Pentecost, by the way. Read it on Pentecost. Lamentation is read on Yom Kippur. Esther is read on a feast that this book is actually made for, is the feast of Purim or Purim. Ecclesiastes on Rosh Hashanah, and Song of Songs is read on Passover. While historical books like Daniel, Ezra, and Nehemiah and Chronicles are an additional teaching books in a way. So let's read that. The divisions in the Tanakh. Again, what's Tanakh? T for Torah, N for Navaim, K for Ketubim. Okay. That these are the three parts in the Jewish Bible. That's the Jewish Bible. So the Jewish Bible is divided. So it's our division is different from the Septuagint. Septuagint is different. What's Septuagint? The Masoretic is the opposite one. What's the Septuagint? The Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. And this was done 300 BC. And it was standardized much earlier than the Masoretic. Okay. So the Tanakh, which is not the Masoretic, by the way. Tanakh is not Masoretic. Let's just be, Tanakh is more, sorry. The Tanakh is not Septuagint. The Tanakh is Masoretic. Okay. Jewish Bible is divided in three parts: Torah, Nevi'im, former and latter, and Ketuvim, the writings. To consider a book as part of the prophets for Jews was one whose writer's sole purpose was to write a prophetic book. Although the books of Samuel and Kings contain historical events, they were written by prophets as prophetic history. These books are under the former prophets. Psalms and the book of Daniel are full of prophecies, but they are considered of the Ketuvim because their lives. Who wrote Psalm? Most of it. David. Was David exclusively a prophet? What was he? A king. So they didn't think of him as prophet. And his book, the Psalms, is not prophetic. Daniel was solely a prophet. He was a prime minister. He was running business in the country in Babylon. Because their lives are not dedicated to prophecy only, but one was a king and the other was a prime minister to King Nebuchadnezzar, and under the Persian rulers Cyrus and Darius, Daniel is considered as prophetic book by Christians. Jesus is the one who called Daniel prophet. Jesus is the one who said that the prophet Daniel had said this. So we think of him as a prophet, but the Jews think of him as not a prophet because he's not dedicated to prophecy. He's a writer of books, of divine books. They say it's a divine book, not part of the prophets. Unless you can read the Old Testament in the original Hebrew, it is recommended to consult several English translations, preferably from these translations: Tanakh, Translation of the Jewish Publication Society, JSV, the New Revised Standard Version. I'm going to give you these copies. I have it, okay? Here is something for you to think about, okay? Take this and go under references. Where is the thing? Maybe here. Here. This is here. That's the JBS, the Jewish Bible Society Tanakh. One thing good about this is actually have the interpretation of the rabbinic teachers here. See, you got the account from the Masoretic text at the Tanakh, and then next to it is a little commentary. That's similar to the Orthodox Study Bible, right? When the Orthodox Study Bible give you the verse, and there is a little bit of patristic under it. So this is the same thing. Yes. Who said it's more accurate? We talked about this like
before. It was like the Hebrew one.
Then we talk about why we don't think it is the more accurate. In the second lecture, we said this was standardized when? No, 600 AD to a millennia, to 1000 AD. This much later. The Septuagint was canonized or was produced was 300 BC. And when I asked, I said, so the question is, what did the old people use, those who are keen to find a good copy? Which Dead Sea Scrolls, the the community at Qumran? What did they use? Both. Were they using one more than the other? No. So I would recommend the same thing. Use all the translation you can when reading something, because we don't have the exact copy that came out of the hand of the writer. All right. So I was here bringing in something here to look at when God says, God said, listen to this. Let us make man in our image, after our likeness. I want to see what the Jews thought about this. God here speaks in plural. Isn't it the commandment says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one? How come that Moses is actually say, make man our image and after our likeness? So I wanted to see what they would say about it. Okay, what verse number is that? 26. 26, right? So what does 26 say here? Let's see. So it has to be somewhere here. Here. Look at this. The plural construction, let us most likely reflect the setting in the divine council. God, the king, announces the proposed course of action to his cabinet of subordinate deities, though he alone retains the power of decision. The Midrash manifests considerable uneasiness with God's proposal to create something so capable of evil as human beings. Okay, so the Midrash, that's one of the interpretation books, report that God told his ministering angels only of the way of the righteous and hid from them the way of the wicked. Another one reports while the angels were debating the proposal among themselves, God took the matter in hand. Why are you debating? He asked them. Man has already been created. That's from Midrash. So what's that mean? They're trying to understand that God is actually talking to angels. But is that possible? He's not saying to them, I'm going to create man. He's saying, let us create man, meaning the angels are involved in is that even plausible? No, they have it too. They have it in Isaiah. Well, we're going to see it in Isaiah. It's a very interesting book to read to see how they see things from the Old Testament. I would recommend to have it. I'm going to send it to you. I'm going to send it over and they can have it. This is a PDF. You can go and look into any book. All right. So look at them. Sometimes I do this. I go into here and look for the verse and say, what is it? Let me put my seat above the seat of the Most High. I might not be exactly book of Isaiah in the Bible, yes. And let's see where it is coming from. Isaiah 14:13. So I'm gonna go back. This is how I get it to make sure that when you do Control F, you get a search. Control F, and then you say Isaiah. What did we say? 14? Isaiah 14. It's not coming. Say it again. Maybe.
Yeah.
Escape. Escape.
Press down.
Here.
Yeah, now.
Control F. Isaiah 14. It's not coming. So what I do is I go into here or here. Yeah. So under Navaim, I'm go with this. So it's here. Isaiah And I have to look for Isaiah 14. Because it's a PDF and it's almost like a picture of it. So I can go down. Let me close this. Unless I know exactly the words. So Isaiah 1, 6, 7, 8. We say 14, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, here we go. Once you thought in your heart, I will climb to the sky, higher than the stars of God. I will set my throne. I will sit in the mount of assembly on the summit of Zaphon. I will mount the back of the cloud. I will match the most high. So 14. Okay. So it's talking about 14. So it should be down here. 14 or up. I don't know if we have it exactly this way. So here is they actually compare it to different mythology. Rabbinic commentators identify the term shining one with the morning star, the planet Venus, which is sometimes visible on the horizon at dawn. Indeed, the mythological figure to whom this poem refers may have been associated with the morning star in an ancient Canaanite myth. Yeah. Yeah, they're not, but this is maybe it's one group of them that, let me see if there's anything here. The king's vain aspiration to God-like status, because this talks about the king of Babylon. God-like status are mocked, as Isaiah refers ironically to the king as shining one, son of dawn, applying to him the name of a character from ancient Canaanite myth. The term shining one is not known from Canaanite texts, but his father, Dawn, is described in Canaanite myth as son of the high god El. Okay, so this is how they interpret things.
Lucifer himself was called the shining one, or like the bright one.
They know. But then the development of the talk about angels and demons was not as ancient as you think. So this most probably happened after the rabbinic talk about this. Anyway, but that's how I look for things. I go into the verse, see where it is, if I have a verse, and I want to go back and look into it. So I go and figure it out. Use the left side. So I'm going to send you that to use. Okay. It's interesting. Once you start going in a little bit deeper into how people think, it opens a lot of doors and you're going to start seeing a lot of connections. You make connections, which is very important in studying the Bible. So that's one form you can use, the translation of Jewish, that's the JSV. The New Revised Standard Version in RSV, the New Jerusalem Bible NJB, or the NIV, New International Versions. You can have all of them. And the rest of them, actually, the Tanakh you might not find online. You might find the PDF, actually, and this is how I downloaded it. But these you will find all on something like Bible Gateway or um, Bible Hub, these two big sites. So you can go here, and what do you do? Here's the version. You can scroll down like this or arrow down, and you have all these translations. So we'll see what NIV does. NIV. It's important that you get used to these things. We talked about how it's about, and RSV is one I like, actually, RSV. come down. RSV I like very much, so, but you have to search it again. RSV. That's the Peter one. What else? You see the NIV? Here, the NIV. And you search and it will come up. And you see that many translation would agree on the way it's translated. Okay, so you're going to have to consult multiple versions from the English. According to rabbinic tradition, the Torah is the first part of the tripartite. When I say tripartite, what does that mean? Three part. That's the term, tripartite. Or quadripartite. What's that mean? Four parts. The three-part canon, followed by the Navaim. First one to be canonized, Torah. Second, Navaim. And then the Ketuvim at the end. Navaim is composed of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, as seen as one book. Kings, as seen as one book. Historical works known as the former prophets and the latter prophets, consisting of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the 12 minor prophets, Hosea through Malachi, seen as one book. All the 12 is one book. The order of these 8 books has been relatively stable. 4 in the former prophets, which is Joshua, Judges, not Ruth, Samuel as one book, Kings as one book, 4 books. First and Second Samuel is just names, but they actually one story. First and Second King is one book. So you have Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. You got that? That's the piece that we looked at here. See that? Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. What's the latter prophets? We said we're going to take Daniel out. The 4 major is -1. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then the 12 is one book. So 4 and 4. Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, 12. All one book. Okay. Now we go back. We're almost done. Ketuvim is composed of the following 11 books, which by contrast appear in a wide variety of orders in various books lists and biblical manuscripts. Psalms, Proverbs, Job. These are poetical books. Psalms, Proverbs, and Job. Then the 5 scrolls, and I told you, what's the 5 scrolls about? Seasons, to be read in certain seasons. Do we have seasonal books that we read in the church? We only read them in that season? Or give me an example. Exactly, Revelation. We only read Revelation on Bright Saturday. What else? Come on now, you're deacons. That's a shame.
Tobit.
Huh?
Tobit.
Tobit. When do we read Tobit? No. We're close. Huh? On the Friday before the Sunday of the man born blind. The Friday of the last Friday, not the last Friday, the Friday before the last of the whole Great Lent. Got that? But there's also whole books read in certain places. Like we read the book of Matthew on Tuesday of Holy Pascha. We read the book of Mark on Wednesday of Holy Pascha. We read Luke on Thursday of Holy Pascha. We read the book of Psalms on Friday before we get out. And we read the book of John in the morning of the Bright Saturday. You have books that's read completely. During the Holy Lent, we finish the book of Isaiah, and we get a big portion of the book of Exodus. Okay, that's enough. So the 5 books are Song of Songs on Passover, Ruth on Pentecost, Lamentation on Yom Kippur, Chronicles on Rosh Hashanah, the New Year's Day, Ecclesiastes, I'm sorry, and Rosh Hashanah. And then what is the 5th one? Esther on Purim, the Feast of Purim, the Feast of the Renovation of the Temple. So that's called the 5 scrolls. The 5 scrolls are one unit for feasts, for seasons. And the last part is the Ketuvim. I'm sorry, last part is history books like Daniel. We said Daniel moved it here. Chronicles and what's the third one? Nehemiah and Ezra. Okay, so the rabbinic texts recognize the Tar Praetor, so we said that. General term for the Bible as whole, though in classical rabbinical literature, this cumbersome locution is not generally employed for the Bible. We call it Orai Tanivai E Uchtivai. That's Aramaic. Rabbinic literature prefers the term Mikra, that which is read, and Ketvi Ha-Kodesh, holy writings. The acronym Tanakh is first found in the Masoretic literature. That's the one who called it the tripartite Tanakh. In the form of TNK. 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 From the Aramaic Oraita, Naivi, Ketivi, Masoretic notes are typically in Aramaic. Tanakh is a Hebrew reflection of this Masoretic term, is also found in Masoretic literature. Here is something for us interesting. St. Athanasius' canon was not the Septuagint, with the Hebrew. There are then, he said that, in one of his festal letters, one of the letters of the Feast of Resurrection. We're almost done. Of the Old Testament, 22 books in number. Why it's not 24 like the Jews? For as I have heard, it is handed down that this is the number of the letters among the Hebrews, the respective order and names being as follows: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and then Deuteronomy. The 5 is here. Following this is Joshua, Judges, he adds Ruth, and again after these 4 books of Kings. What are the 4 books of Kings? It's actually 1st and 2nd Samuel. He calls them 1st and 2nd King. Then 3rd and 4th King are the kings. The 1st and the 2nd being reckoned as one book. So likewise, the 3rd and 4th as one book. Samuel in 1st and Samuel, we know that from the Hebrews, they're one book. And Kings the same. And again, the 1st and 2nd of Chronicles are reckoned as one book. Again, Ezra, the 1st and 2nd. First Ezra is Ezra. 2nd Ezra is Nehemiah. Are similarly one book. After this, the books of Psalms, the book of Psalms, then Proverbs, then Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs. Job follows, then the prophets, the 12 being reckoned as one book, then Isaiah one book, then Jeremiah with Baruch. He adds Baruch here. Lamentations. Baruch is not found in the Masoretic. And the Epistle of Jeremiah, which is an extra book, one book. Afterwards, Ezekiel and Daniel, each one book. Thus, for far constitutes the Old Testament. So why is it ending by 22? Because he adds books together. He adds books together. St. Athanasius' canon is similar to the Hebrew Tanakh canon. He began by stating the book's number as 22, while Tanakh is 24. Remember that? You bring more than 24 to your house, you're bringing mayhem, confusion, right? 24 is the number. The difference is in St. Athanasius not counting Esther. He doesn't consider Esther part of the Bible. Interesting. And I tell you the truth, Esther is a interesting book because it's all about the story of the God's protecting the Jews. And its main reason is to celebrate the renovation of the temple. So counting lamentation with Jeremiah, he also added Baruch and the Epistle of Jeremiah to Jeremiah. So he gathered at least 2 groups together, so cutting down the number to 22. That's what St. Athanasius. So here is some canons. Canons, when I say canons, what's recognized as books of the Bible by other groups. Samaritan, what do they have? I told you. Only the Torah. Why? They hate the prophets. You know why? Because the prophets is against them. The prophets are condemning them. How about the books of the Tanakh? These are the group, the Hebrew Bible, the Masoretic one. Included by Catholics, Orthodox, but excluded by most Protestant. We have Tobit, Judith, Maccabees, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, Baruch, Letter of Jeremiah, addition to Daniel, The story of Susanna we read on Bright Saturday, prayer of Azariah, that in the midnight praise, song of the three young men in midnight praise, and the story of Bill and Dragon in addition to Esther. But there is also included by the Orthodox, not the Copts. They have Esdras, first Esdras, third Maccabees, fourth Maccabees, prayer of Manasseh, and Psalm 151. We have those two. Included by Russian and Ethiopian Orthodox is second Esdras. Included by Ethiopian Orthodox even more. You have Jubilees, Enoch, first to third Maccabean, and then Baruch, fourth. Syrian Bashita Bible, this is in the Syrian tradition, is Psalms 152 to 155. We have 151. Second Baruch includes the letters of Baruch. Interesting, isn't it?
They agree to.
Not these traditions. We have actually, how many books we have in, huh? No, we have more. 49. 49 books in our Old Testament. We're not following the rule. They can do it. It's their job. So what's the Dead Sea Scrolls? We have to finish that. You hear about them? Did you hear about Dead Sea Scrolls? Okay. They are a collection of 981 texts discovered between 1946 and 1956 at Khirbet Qumran. Khirbet, Khirba, Kharaba, Khirba. What's that? Ruins. A place where people used to live, but after time passes, what happened? It became ruins, abandoned. So it's a ruins of at Qumran. Qumran is a place. In the west bank of the what's the West Bank? الضفة الغربية. What's West Bank? You hear about this in news. West Bank of Jordan River. The Jordan River stands like this. There's east, there's west. So it's on the West Bank belonging to Israel, not in Jordan. They're found inside caves about a mile inland from the northwest shore of the Dead Sea, from which they derive their name. 9 of the scrolls were rediscovered at the Israel Antiquities Authorities in 2014 after they had been stored unopened for 6 decades following their excavation in 1952. The texts are of great historical, religious, and linguistic significance because they include the earliest known surviving manuscripts of works later included in the Hebrew Bible canon, along with deuterocanonical and extra-biblical manuscripts which preserve evidence of the diversity of religious thought in late Second Temple Judaism. That's the time of Jesus. Second Temple is Jesus. The texts are written in Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Nabatean, mostly on parchments, but with some written on papyrus and bronze. The manuscripts have been dated to various ranges between 408 BC, and 318 CE. I would say BC, I would just do that, BC, and CE is AD. Bronze coins found on the site from series beginning with John Hyrcanus, that's at the time of the Maccabees, and continuing until the First Jewish-Roman War, 66 to 73 AD. I want to do this BC, so make it simple. The scroll of the prophet Isaiah was found in Cave 1 at Qumran, 1947. From such a scroll, Jesus read in the synagogue in Nazareth. And that's it. Have an idea now? What is this? Let me go with you. So I should have done something about how they discovered it. So, yes.
What is the difference between BCE and BC?
So they don't want to say, it's offensive to the Jews to say, or to people who doesn't believe in Christ to say, the year of the Lord, Anno Domini. Anno Domini means you're counting from the birth of Christ. Their reasoning, they say, that Jesus was not born in the year that was thought to be. So they brought it actually 4 years earlier. So instead of confusing ourselves, we're going to change the date from the year of the Lord, because he was born 4 years earlier, to the common era. So you can say common era or before the common era. Common era means when they started counting, the year 0. Because it's not the year of the birth of Christ, so we're going to change its name to become the common era. Means when the people, the historians by hand, by monk-like communities who copied almost all the books of the Bible. But what we have is not everything. What we have is one book is Isaiah, especially is multiple copies and entirely fixed, and it's very close. It's actually identical to what you have in New King James. They say it's identical. You know, book of Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, all kinds of things. Okay, you can look into it. Please look at the commentary and read about the Dead Sea Scrolls, because I would recommend that. You have to know that. So if somebody says that, how do you know that the Bible is not changed? That's a very common question people ask. How come you trust the Bible and you don't think it's changed? One of the things I say, 300 years before Christ, the copies are still preserved and it matches what we have. Let's see, our Father. Any questions? Then you will be asked questions if you don't ask questions. You don't ask questions, you get questions. Fair, I think. So, our Father. Make us worthy to say, thank you, our Father who art in heaven. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily. Give us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Christ Jesus our Lord. In the love of God the Father and grace of the only begotten Son, Jesus Christ, in the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, be with you, be in peace, peace be with you. We have the Vespers now.